Is my screen visible, Divya? 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 Nazir?
Sir, yes, sir, it's visible.
Yeah. Okay, you can interact with me. I think her connectivity may not be that much good.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So, good morning, all of you. And we have started jar test apparatus. Last class we discussed because the approximate dose as well as in what pH range it will be working better, that can be determined by jar test apparatus in the laboratory. Okay, so jar test normally has 6 mixing paddle, and each and every paddle can be rotated as a variable speed that will provide a mixing for coagulation. And you can take up 6 at a time with 1 liter beaker, and you can also use rectangular jars, okay, for with the modern apparatus. And you can also use one sample as a control, okay, without any coagulants. So 5 sample plus 1 control. Okay, so the sample which may have turbidity, so your objective is to remove that colloids. Okay, so just you take as 1 control without any coagulants, and 5 you may not know what range you have to apply the dose. You can go for a random and trial methods. And 5, in this example, if you start with 1 milligram, 1 milligram, 2 milligram, 3, 4, and 5 milligram. Okay, so you just place it somewhere here. Okay, somewhere here, and you can also place the paddles exactly in the middle of the beaker. Thereby, the dispersions may be uniform. Switch on the instrument. You could also able to see the illuminations at the bottom. Tube lights are lights at the bottom. You can also see that. And this operations can be with 3 different modes. Number 1, initially by rapid mixing, the maximum speed is 100 RPM for a shorter minute, 0.5 to 1 minute, and followed by a slow mixing, almost 15 to 20 minutes with 25 to 35 RPM. And third one is stop the jar test apparatus and allow the solids to settle for 35 to 45 minutes without stirring. Okay, the first step, which normally resembles the actual activity which is happening in a rapid mixing tank in the real treatment system. The second step, which will normally imitates or similar to the second one, the flocculation process in the actual treatment plant. Third one, this also is something similar to what we follow in the sedimentation tank in the real actual situation. Okay, so rapid mixing followed by a slow mixing and allow the solids to settle for simple settling for 35 to 40 minutes. Okay, yeah. So this is what the experiment will look like in the laboratory. Okay, so one may be control and others may be with a variable dosages, and you could also feel like complete destabilized colloids like this. Okay, so once you add the coagulant, and if you go for rapid mixing and followed by slow mixing, you could also see there could be a destabilization of colloids. Okay, so one control, you just measure what is the initial turbidity, initial. Okay, and each and every beaker at the end of the settling, you can also take out and measure what is the turbidity remaining. Okay, so percentage also you can able to calculate initial minus final or initial minus remaining. You may get percentage of turbidity removed. Okay, yes. Okay, so initial residual turbidity is also you can measure, and this experiment you can operate in 2 different ways. One is for dose, another is for pH. Okay, vary the pH, vary the dosage and fix the dose, optimum dose, and fix the dose in the second experiment and vary the pH. And at the end of these 2 experiments, you could able to see optimum dose and optimum pH also. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is only the trial because I've explained in simple first experiment this pH. If you want to alter the pH, you can add sulfuric acid and sodium hydroxide because initially the sample may be with a constant pH. You can alter the pH by adding, if you want to lower the pH, you add sulfuric acid. If If you want to increase the pH, add a base, sodium hydroxide. Thereby, you could be able to make these ranges. Okay, and then rapid mixing and slow mixing, and finally you have a settling. Okay, so you may get a plot. You can plot like this, a pH, because in individual beakers you have a pH, and in the after settling you just take out the sample, measure the turbidity remaining. Please make a note on turbidity remaining. Then you can plot like this, and you may get a graph, and you just, this is your optimum pH. Say for this case it may be around 6.25 as a pH. 6.25 as a pH. Okay. You can also draw in Volta, that is his pH versus percentage of turbidity removed. Percentage of turbidity removed in terms of percentage. Here it is remaining, and then if you have, then you may get a Volta graph like this. Is it okay? Percentage of turbidity or turbidity removed, you may get a graph like this. And this could be your optimum value. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So pH versus turbidity remaining, you may get this one. And pH versus percentage of turbidity removed in terms of percentage, you may get a upper graph like this. Okay. So now you fix 6.25 in all beakers and do one more experiment by varying the dosages. So in this situation, you fix 6.25 and vary the dose. 5, 7, 12, 15, 20. So at least before start of the experiment, you should also familiar with the approximate ranges of the coagulant to be added. That is also sometimes is necessary. Imagine our situation, I may require 12 milligram per liter, but if I do the variations only with only 7 milligram per liter, you may not get a result. So you should have at least a prior idea on how much is the turbidity in the influent or incoming water, and what could be the possible way of adding the coagulants, a range. Okay, so then you just vary the range and go for rapid mixing, slow mixing, and settling, and measure the final turbidity in each sample. And you just measure or draw plot alum dosage versus turbidity remaining. You may get a graph like this and find out. In this case, is about 12 milligram per liter, and the previous experiment is 6.25 pH. Okay, these two values you just inform to the operator, plant operator, to purge chemical at a dose of 12 milligram per liter, and the pH in the incoming water with the 6.25. Thereby, whatever the colloids which is in the system is completely being destabilized, that can be taken over or taken care in the sedimentation tank for simple separation. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is what we discussed in the last class, I guess. Okay. Okay. So if you add chemicals like alum, iron salts, okay, sodium aluminate, and other, we have discussed 6 or 7 different coagulants, and which may contributes a lot of the chemical sludge. Okay, and the dosage also sometimes we have to add excess. Okay, to remove a particular range of turbidity. And to overcome that difficulty, now people have started trying with polymers. Okay, so please make a note on polymers. Instead of chemical, they may also use coagulant with polymer. Okay, so these synthetic polymers can be effective as coagulants or coagulant aids. So please make a note on. Instead of chemical, you can use synthetic polymers also. So polymers normally are long chain molecules consisting of subunits called as monomers. So basic chemistry also you would have seen or you would have studied in first year, polymer chemistry. Okay, so polymers are long chain molecules consisting of many subunits called monomers. And when the polymer consists of only one type of monomer, that is called as homopolymer, and consists of different type, that is called as copolymer. Okay, please make a note on what is homopolymer and what is copolymer. You would have seen homopolymerization equations or reactions and copolymerization reactions also. Okay, so please make a note on polymers are long chain molecules and which contains a subunits called monomers, and polymer consists of only one type of monomer, that is homopolymer, and if it consists of a different type of monomers, that is called as copolymers. Okay, and polymers are sometimes called as polyelectrolytes. Please make a note on, because that's what we have discussed, or we have started discussion with polyelectrolytes. Okay, polymers are known as polyelectrolytes, and if the monomer contains ionizable groups, please make a note on. Okay, in the long chain, monomers, and you have a capability of ionizing by themselves, that you can simply call it as polyelectrolytes. Okay, and polyelectrolytes again is classified into two. Number one, cationic. Another one is about non-ionic and ampolytic also. Okay, if it is a positive charge or positive groups are present, you can call it as cationic polymers. If it is negative groups are present, that is called as anionic polymers. If it is no ionizable charges are present, then you can call it as non-ionic. And if both positive and negative roots are present, you can call it as ambipolitic. Okay, ambipolitic polymers. Okay, please make a note on what are polyelectrolytes. It's very simple. Polymers which contains ionizable groups that are called polyelectrolytes, and based on the charges, positive, negative, and no charges, and both the charges, you can classify it into cationic, anionic, non-ionic, and ampolytic polymers. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So cationic polymers, some example you can remember, polyvinyl pyridinium bromide, and sodium polyacrylate, and sodium polystyrene sulfonate are anionic polymers. Okay, so please remember one example of cationic polymer as polyvinyl pyridinium bromide, and anionic polymers you can remember the sodium polyacrylate or sodium polystyrene sulfonate. So these are anionic polymers. Okay, and non-ionic polymers are PVC, polyvinyl alcohol, and polyethylene oxide. Okay, so at least while studying this slide, you just remember three examples. One for cationic polymer, and one for anionic polymer, and one for non-ionic polymer. Okay, non-ionic polymer. And in our case, you have to use in the water, because most of the solids are negatively charged. You can use cationic polymers. Cationic polymers are effective coagulating negatively charged particles. Okay, please make a note of. Cationic polymers are effectively coagulating negatively charged particles, because water contains a lot of silt and clay, which contributes a lot of negatively charged particles. Then what you have to do, you have to add positive charge polymers, thereby neutralization may happen. Okay, so because of adding cationic polymers, and you may get different like mechanisms, either bridge formation or charge neutralization, or both. Okay, please make a note on this. Will come back later while explaining how the addition of polymers will react in the water. Okay, so bridge formation and charge neutralization is very simple, because all the particles inside the water are negatively charged. If you add positive charge polymers as chemical, thereby there could be a charge neutralization. The smaller particles will form a bigger particles, and we gains gravity that can be removed or further taken care in the sedimentation process. Okay, yeah. Okay, the effectiveness of polymers is dependent on its size and shape of the polymer in solution. Please make a note of that. Something is important. The effectiveness of polymers is dependent on the size of the polymer, what you are adding, and the shape of polymer in the solution. And the shape and size of the polymer is affected by predominantly pH of the solution. And ionic valency. And the third one is ionic strength of the solution. So please remember these 3 points. At least you remember as B.Tech level as pH. pH plays a major role to optimize the dose for your polymer addition for destabilization of the colloids. Okay, yeah. Okay, so these polymers have a helical molecular structure comprised of carbon chain with ionizing groups attached. That to what we have discussed in the previous slide. Polymers are a long chain that helical molecular structure comprised of carbon atom or carbon chains with ionizable groups attached. Okay. As the groups become ionized in solution, they become electrical repulsion among themselves. Please make a note on polymers. Okay, you have a negative charge particles inside the water. You may add positive charge polymers inside the solution, and if you add polymers inside the water, and this polymers are equal charges. If you say example, same charges, it will repel each other. That's what the point says. Groups become ionized in solution. They cause electrical repulsion among themselves. Okay, and because of this repulsion, this causes the polymer to assume this shape of an extended rod. Something like, if you add a drop of polymer inside the water, what will happen? It will become like a rod, shape of an extended rod. Okay, that will come back later. The how the polymers and particles will react. Okay, so please remember, as soon as you add or whenever you add the polymer inside the water, so what will happen? It will become like shape which is similar to an extended rod. Okay, extended rod, and it will also repel each other. It will also repel each other. Okay. As the ionized groups become attached to the colloidal particle, the charges becomes neutralized. Imagine now a situation, this is your polymer with ionizable charges with more positive, and if the negative charge particles comes in, automatically will attach onto a head or tail, whatever maybe. Okay, this is your negative charge particle, and this is higher positive ionizable group, so it will attach onto a polymer like this. Okay, as the ionized group becomes attached to a colloidal particle, the charges are neutralized. Okay, the polymers start to coil and form a denser block. Okay, this is okay. One site is being occupied by a colloid, and other site is free. Okay, if any near particles is nearby, it will also attach. It will also attach like this. It will also attach like this. Okay, that's what is being mentioned. The polymers start to coil and form a denser block. Denser flock. Okay. And polymer overdose can also lead to excess of unneutralized sites, which can also lead to stable straight line structure of polymers. Okay, so optimum dose also something is important, and if the dose is not proper, there could be a problem of again the restabilization of colloids as well. Okay, destabilization is completely now you are making as a flock. Okay, if it is dosage is higher, there could be a possibilities of restabilization. That means is whatever the formed flock, it will also come back again as a individual colloids. Okay, yes. Yeah. Usually low dosages are required for cationic polymer as a function of an effective coagulants. Okay. Compared to chemical coagulants, these polymers may require very smaller dose. Okay. So polymer dosages are usually an order of magnitude or even lower than alum. Okay. Alum may require higher dose than that of cationic polymer. Okay, yes. The advantages of polymer here, and elimination of pH changes, that is number one, because if you add alum or if you add the iron salts into the water, there could be a pH changes. But here the important of polymer addition is elimination of pH changes in the treated water and reduction in the amount of sludge. That is also again the task. Chemical coagulants may sometimes produce lot of sludges, and these polymers may also again produce a smaller amount of sludge, but dewatering is very easy than that of chemical sludges. That is also again this thing. And very important point is no soluble aluminum carry over in the distribution system. That's something is important. Imagine our situation, you would have added alum salt into the water, and by mistake you have predicted in excess or you have calculated in excess. So partially the Al3+ ions will be taken care by the coagulation activity, but unutilized aluminum will come out as it is without any difficulty, without any treatment or without any. So unutilized aluminum will come out along with the treated water, and there could be a lot of aluminum addition in the drinking water, addition of unutilized aluminum in the drinking water quality or drinking water. And problem of aluminum would have seen or would have studied, it will also create Alzheimer's disease related to brain damages and neural damages or something. And prolonged exposure with iron, aluminum also have a lot of nervous and brain-related diseases. Okay, that's something is important. That's what now people have started looking into a lot of polymer-based polyelectrolytes in the water treatment system. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Now you can look into the reactions, like how the typical reactions may happen. Initial adsorption at the optimum polymer dose. Okay, this is your polymer, this is your particle with a negatively charged, and if I add polymer into the water, and it may also have a lot of ionizable sites. So it will attach and it will form like this. Okay, it will form like this. Initially, these polymers also, because of the same charges repel each other, there could be a lot of attraction on negatively charged particles. So this particles is getting attached onto a surface like this, active sites like this. Okay, thereby it will become destabilized. Okay, and imagine our situation: two different particles of this nature meets each other. There could be a attachment like this. The second reaction, that is flock formation. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is number one, destabilized. If it is the particle is attached on one active sites, it completely becomes destabilized in nature. And two individual destabilized particles is meet or collide each other, then it will form a flock formation like this. Okay. So individually may not have any gravity, but here because of 2-3 additions, which will become heavier, and that can be easily separated in a settling or clarification tank. Okay. Yeah. And imagine our situation, third one, secondary adsorption. Okay, imagine now there is no particles to attach onto other side. Normally they call it as this is head side, this is tail side. Imagine our situation, there is a lot of free sides are available, but there is no particle to attach, and thereby this will become like this by the simple action called a restabilized particle like this. Okay, so all the free sides may also attach to another particle, to same particle, something like this. Okay, this is the secondary adsorption of polymer. Okay, and if you do the excess polymer, okay, say example, the particles are very smaller in number, but you would have added excess polymer, and there could be a formation like this also. Okay, so initial adsorption with the excess polymer addition, there could be a like the formation like this also. Okay, and another possibility is this rupturing. Okay, please make a note on these are good flocks, and which normally has a lot of gain in gravity that can be easily managed. But imagine our situation, and if the flocculation in the flocculation chamber, your mixing speed is very high, there could be a possibilities of rupture. Okay, please make a note on. There could be a possibilities of rupture like this, and because of rupture or prolonged agitation or intense or prolonged agitations, these flock particles are also sometimes disintegrated into number of pieces like this. Is it okay? This is called again flock fragments that cannot be separated in a clarification or sedimentation tank. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So please make a note on. This is called disintegration of already been formed flocks. Okay, flock fragments. And once it is again, if it is being fragmented, there could be again step number 3, something similar to secondary adsorption. Flock fragments are again to a restabilized form like this. Okay, so these are 4 or 5 different steps. And let me recall one more time. One is initial adsorption with the optimum dose, it will go perfect. Second one, 2 individuals may form a flock. Second one, flock formation. If the active sites are not there, it will go for a secondary adsorption of polymer like this. And if it is this excess addition of polymer, there could be a condition like this, no condition like this. And fifth option, if it is anything on excess or intense of prolonged agitation, will end up with rupturing of or rupture or fragmentation of the particles like this, flock particles like this. And if it is anything on the fragmentation, then again there could be a possibilities of restabilization of particles like this. Okay, these are the 6 reactions you can have it up in polymeric polyelectrolytes or polymer coagulants. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Last point is the coagulant aid. That something is important. Okay. So coagulant, you are already familiar. What is coagulant? Is the chemical. Okay. Chemical is to be added to, say example, the destabilize the colloids. Destabilize the colloids. Okay. So please remember the coagulant aid. Okay. Imagine now a situation. Okay. So you have, say example, 50 NTU of turbidity. Okay, listen properly. Okay, you may 50 NTU of turbidity, you may require 4 milligram per liter of alum. Is it fine? For example, for the 50 NTU of turbidity or colloids removal, you may require 4 milligram per liter of alum. Okay, and say example another one, for 30 NTU of turbidity removal, you may require say example 5.5 milligram per liter of alum. Is it fine? Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
50 NTU may require 4 milligram per liter. I can do, or I can operate the plant very nicely without any difficulty. But suddenly I may have a water which is coming in with only 30 NTU. I know that 30 NTU may require higher addition of alum for the removal. So what I do now, instead of adding 5.5 milligram per liter of alum, I may artificially increase my turbidity to 50 NTU. Thereby, my chemical requirement will come down to 4 milligram per liter. Is it fine? Is it fine?
Yes,
Is it
sir.
okay? Yeah, 50 I may require 4 milligram per liter, but 30 I may require 5.5 milligram. So 1.5 milligram in excess I may I may go for a higher operational cost because of chemical addition. 1.5 milligram per liter addition will sometimes end up with chemical cost in an elevated manner. So what I do, instead of adding 5.5 milligram per liter, I may artificially increase my turbidity level to 50 NTU. Thereby, my requirement of chemical will come down to 4 milligram per liter. Okay, so these artificial turbidity causing agents are called coagulant aids. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what not these coagulant aids are, please make a note on example. Number one, bentonite clay. You can add bentonite clay, and you can also add activated silica. Okay, if you want to increase the colloidal concentration artificially, you can add bentonite clay or activated silica. So which may also increase your colloidal concentration. Further, in turn, it increases your turbidity, and you can also optimize the chemical addition. Thereby, my chemical consumption will come down. Okay, these agents are called as coagulant aids. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. So this coagulant aid sometimes also added to improve the flock properties and enhances the coagulation. And here again, anionic and also non-ionic polymers also used as a coagulant aids. So please make a note on polymers also been used as a coagulant aids, anionic and also non-ionic polymers. Okay, yeah. Now the suitability, okay, suitability of coagulants. Okay, there could be a situation you have a high turbidity and high alkalinity water, where these are called as type 1, very easy to coagulate, easiest to coagulate. In the case of alum, you have to maintain the pH range of 5 to 7, and addition of alkalinity and coagulant aid is not required. In the case of ferrous salts or ferric salts, and it will be effective in the pH range of 6 to 7. And here also again, addition of alkalinity and coagulant aid is not required. And cationic polymers are very effective. Anionic and non-ionic polymers also be effective. And higher molecular weight materials are the best. And magnesium salts, if you add, effective due to precipitation of magnesium hydroxide. Okay. And the second classification is you may have a situation high turbidity and low alkalinity. Okay. So water, whatever it is coming into a treatment plant, doesn't contain alkalinity. Please make a note on. This also we have discussed. If the water does not contain any alkalinity, you have to add extra addition of alkalinity by in the way of lime addition. Okay, lime addition. That's also we have discussed. Okay. Second situation or second type is water with lot of turbidity, but alkalinity is not sufficient to go for your coagulation activity. Okay. So here also again effective for the pH range of 5 to 7. May need to add alkalinity. Please make a note on. Okay, there is no sufficient alkalinity is present. In this case, you have to add alkalinity. Okay, alkalinity you have to add alkalinity. Okay, and the third case you may get low turbidity and higher alkalinity. Please make a note on. This is the third case. Sometimes in the treatment plant there could be a situation also low turbidity and high alkalinity water. Okay, and here it may require larger dosage. Please make a note on effective in relatively larger dosage, which promotes precipitation of aluminum hydroxide. And here what I do to reduce my chemical addition, I may use coagulant aid. Now you could understand better because low turbidity, which may require excess, say example, excess the chemical addition or coagulant. Okay, you may also require to add coagulant aid. Artificially, you have to increase the turbidity, thereby the chemical consumption will come down. Okay, so here also again, it may also require, in the case of ferric salts, you may require additional ferric salts, and here also you can add coagulant aid. Okay, so polymer may not feasible because cannot work alone due to lower turbidity. Here also again you have to add coagulant aid. Okay, and last condition, low turbidity, low alkalinity. That's the fourth type. It is very difficult to coagulate. This situation very difficult to coagulate. And here we have to artificially increase alkalinity. You have to add alkalinity. In the case of iron salts also, you have to add alkalinity to produce. At least you can shift the situations to second case or third case. Please make a note on this. Something is important. Okay. Fourth case, it is very difficult to go for a coagulation process. Okay. And instead of wasting time, you can also shift these fourth cluster of results situations to either second or third case. Thereby, you could operate in an effective manner. Is it okay? So please remember these four conditions and what type of salts are very much important for coagulation activity. Type 1, high turbidity, high alkalinity. Type 2, high turbidity, low alkalinity. Third case is low turbidity and high alkalinity. And fourth case is very difficult to coagulate. That is low turbidity and low alkalinity. So if any situation exists in this condition, and you have to shift the condition to other cases, thereby the coagulation activity will go for in a smooth way. Is it fine? Is it okay? So this covers the entire portion or concept note on the coagulation process. Okay. So what we have discussed so far is what is coagulation, what's the typical mechanism, what type of coagulants you can use, and coagulant reactions, and how to optimize the coagulant dose and also pH using that jar test apparatus. And sixth concept what we have used is what are polymers, classification of polymers, and polymer additions in the water as coagulant. And the last part is the comparison between iron, alum, and polymeric salts with different type of water combinations, type 1, type 2, and type 3, and type 4 water for your effective coagulation process. Okay, and last portion, whatever we have discussed is on coagulant aid also. Okay, you can add artificially increase the turbidity level. You can add pentanate clay or activated silica. Thereby turbidity has been increased, or turbidity you can increase to a certain level. Thereby the chemical consumption will come down. Okay, that sort of agents are called as coagulant aids. Is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll see one or two problems here. Is the screen visible, Divya?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I'll be solving some 2-3 difficult problems, but you can also highlight or study. These are only stoichiometric calculations. Okay. So number 1. Okay. So determine the quantity of alum required for treating 13 mld of water, and which contains or which may require 12 milligram per liter of alum. And you can also determine the amount of carbon dioxide gas produced will be released per liter of water. Okay, so here the problem statement says the coagulant used are alum, and the water to be treated as 13 mld, and it is being optimized in the laboratory. You may require 12 milligram per liter of alum. Okay, and now you have to estimate how much amount of alum is required for treat this particular quantity of water. At the same time, because of the addition, you could also estimate how much amount of carbon dioxide will be released per liter of water. Is it fine? Yeah. So this is very simple. That's even I normally I keep on telling you in calculations. Okay, if the quantity is being given, dosage is being given, you just multiply both, then you may get quantity. Okay, quantity of water to be treated is 13 into 10 power 6 liters per day. Alum, it is given the problem as 12 milligram per liter, and you can multiply both 13 into 10 power 6 liters per day. That is water to be treated multiply by alum dosage as 12 milligram per liter, you may get in terms of milligram per day. Milligram per day. Okay, please write along the units while solving the problems. Okay, so liter will go off, you may get milligram per day. Okay, and you just convert in terms of kilogram, 156 kilogram. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The second step is you should be familiar with chemical reactions. That's what I told you while discussing the chemical reactions. Okay. If I add alum into the water, it may react with the sufficient alkalinity. It will form aluminum hydroxide, imparts permanent hardness, and will also produce considerable amount of carbon dioxide. Okay. This equation you should be familiar with. Then only you can solve any combination of problems. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now you check out the molecular weight of alum. Aluminium, it is 26.97, and 3 times of sulfate. Sulfur is 32.066, and 4 times of oxygen, plus 18 H2O. 18 into hydrogen is 1.008, and oxygen is 16. So just calculate or remember the molecular weight of like alum is 666. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now molecular weight of carbon dioxide. Okay, carbon dioxide is CO2. That is carbon is 12.01. 2 times of oxygen. 2 into 16. That is 44. Molecular weight of carbon dioxide is 44. Okay. Now you look into the equation. Okay. And if I use 666 milligram of alum, okay, if I use 666 milligram of alum, which will produce 6 into 44 milligram of carbon dioxide. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So 666 milligram of alum, if used, will release 6 into 42 milligram of carbon dioxide. So thereby I can able to calculate 1 milligram of alum if used will produce 6 into 44 divided by 666 milligram per alum. Thereby you may it will produce 0.396 milligram of carbon dioxide. 1 milligram of alum will produce 0.396 milligram of carbon dioxide. These are thumb relations you can remember. 1 milligram per liter. 1 milligram of alum in water will release 0.396 milligram of carbon dioxide. So what is our requirement? In the problem, it is been mentioned as it is been added with 12 milligram per liter of alum. Okay. So what now? You have to multiply 0.396 into 12 milligram of carbon dioxide, thereby which may produce 4.756 milligram of carbon dioxide. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you add 12 milligram per liter, 12 milligram of alum to treat 1 liter of water, okay, which may produce 6.76 milligram of carbon dioxide. Okay, carbon dioxide evolved per liter of water is 4.76. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, any clarifications here? Okay, this same set of equivalent comparisons can be extended to other type of coagulants as well. That I'm not going to solve problems, but you can look into the same problems. This is very simple. If you are familiar with that stoichiometric equations with all coagulants, you can play with that equation. Is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So any clarifications here? Nazir?
No, sir.
Any clarifications here? Because I'm not going to solve with the different combinations, but only because predominantly it is being used only alum. So I'm trying to highlight with alum equations. Is it fine? Is it okay? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. And then I'll come back the problem later. Okay. Okay. The second problem with alum. Okay. Please make a note on this. Is also something is important. Okay. A coagulation and sedimentation plant clarify 40 million liters of water every day. The quantity of filter alum requires is 18 milligram per liter. If the raw water having an alkalinity of 5 milligram per liter of calcium carbonate, determine the quantity of filter alum and quicklime, which contains again the 85% of calcium oxide required per year by the plant. Is it okay? So if you recall what we are discussing in the class, alum reactions may require sufficient alkalinity. If sufficient alkalinity is not there, you have to add alkalinity in terms of lime. Is it okay? Have you understood this problem?
Yes, sir.
40 ml you have to treat, and you have to add 18 milligram per liter of alum, but water contains only 5 milligram per liter of calcium carbonate as equivalent alkalinity. And now this problem might be that 5 milligram per liter alkalinity is not sufficient. Then you have to add alkalinity in terms of alum, quicklime. So quicklime contains 85% of calcium oxide. Now you have to calculate how much amount of alum is required and how much amount of lime required for this treatment. Okay, so this I'm not going to discuss in detail because this we are already familiar. Quantity of water to be treated is 40 mld, 40 into 10 power 6 liters per day, and 18 milligram per liter is your requirement alum. If you multiply this both, you may get 720 kilogram per day, but it is been asked to calculate per year. So thereby I may multiply by 720 multiplied by 365 days. Is it fine? Thereby I may require in terms of kilogram, you convert in terms of tons, 262.8 tons. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then this equation I am already familiar. Alum with a sufficient alkalinity, it will form aluminum hydroxide, calcium sulfate, and carbon dioxide. Alum reactions we are already familiar. Okay. So if I add this calcium oxide in the water, it will form calcium carbonate. This could be the second equation. Number one, first equation, the second equation like this. Because I'm going to add quicklime in terms of calcium oxide. Is it okay? So if I add calcium oxide in the water, which may also react with carbon dioxide, which will form calcium carbonate. Again, the calcium carbonate also will be reacting with the water, which will form calcium bicarbonate also. Is it fine? So these three reactions you have to be familiar with. Is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Now you can look into the molecular weights. Alum, we have already calculated 666. You have to be familiar. And each and every problem you need not look into or you need not calculate. You can simply remember molecular weight of calcium bicarbonate is 162, calcium carbonate is 100, and calcium oxide is 56. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Now you just look into the equation, and you read the statement. From the above equation, it is clear that alum requires 3 into 162 parts of natural alkalinity as calcium bicarbonate. Okay, look into the equations very clearly. Okay, so if you want to have a typical reaction of alum to happen, you may require calcium bicarbonate as 3 equivalent. That's what is being mentioned in this problem. Okay, so it is clear that alum requires 3 into 162 parts of natural alkalinity because 162 is molecular weight of calcium bicarbonate as calcium bicarbonate. Okay, for every part of alum, and this 3 into 162 parts of calcium bicarbonate is equivalent to 3 into 100 parts of alkalinity as calcium carbonate. Please make a note on. Okay, this is the second statement. Either 3 parts of calcium bicarbonate or 3 into 100 parts as calcium carbonate. Please make a note on. Alkalinity can be expressed in terms of calcium carbonate or calcium bicarbonate equivalent. If it is with calcium bicarbonate equivalent, you may require 3 into 162 part. If it is calcium carbonate equivalent, you may require 3 into 100 parts of alkalinity. Is it okay? Is it fine? Okay, now we look into 1 mole of alum is equivalent to 3 mole of calcium bicarbonate, which is again equivalent to 3 mole of calcium carbonate. Okay, now you can equivalent to molecular weight 666 milligram of alum require or equivalent to 3 into 162 milligram of calcium bicarbonate is equivalent to again 3 into 100 milligram of calcium carbonate. Okay, so now we can directly convert because it may be because this alkalinity is being mentioned in the problem in terms of alkalinity is mentioned in terms of calcium carbonate. Please make a note on this. Something is important. You have to read out the problem carefully. If it is being mentioned calcium carbonate, take it as calcium carbonate. If it is mentioned as calcium bicarbonate, you can convert in terms of calcium carbonate equivalent based on your requirement. Okay. So here it is being asked to calculate calcium carbonate equivalent. Okay. I can take out this and this. Okay. Thereby 1 milligram of or what you can also calculate 1 milligram of alum requires or directly 18 milligram of alum requires. So 18 milligram of alum requires 3 into 100 divided by 666 into 18. So you may require 8.108 milligram per liter as calcium carbonate. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Is it fine? Yeah. So for this alum reactions to happen, I may require 8.108. But what is available is only 5 milligram per liter. Is it okay? Now you have to calculate how much is the additional alkalinity is required. So there, this is required, this is available. Thereby, I may have to add 3.108 milligram per liter as calcium carbonate to the water. Thereby, these alum reactions will go without any difficulty. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now it is not directly given as calcium carbonate, but it is been given in terms of calcium oxide. Okay, please remember whatever we are discussing the problem, it is been given as quicklime, which contains 88% of calcium oxide. Okay, so now you can have a relation like this: 100 parts of calcium carbonate is produced by 56 parts of calcium oxide. Thereby, the quantity of calcium oxide required is equal to 56 by 100 into this value. Okay, you can also write down the equation and you make a equivalent. Nothing, it is not very big task. You can also do like that. Okay, because only the steps will be increasing, but nothing wrong. You can also prolong that equivalent equations like that also. Okay, so thereby the quantity of calcium oxide required is equal to 56 by 100 into 3.108, which may have almost is 1.75, 1.74 milligram per liter. Okay, but it is being mentioned clearly in the problem. This calcium oxide or quicklime contains only 88%. So what do you do now? How much amount of the actual lime is required? Okay, 1.74 multiplied by 100 by 85. So if I add 2.05 milligram per liter, which may supplement 1.75 milligram of calcium oxide. So I may require 2.05 milligram of calcium oxide. Okay. Then I can calculate how much is the total. Okay, so for 1 liter I may require 2.05. For 40 mld I may require 40 mld multiplied by 2.05, thereby 82.82 kilogram per day. It is also been asked to calculate for 1 year, thereby it becomes 30 tons per year of lime required to maintain the alkalinity or to destabilize the colloids. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so please go through these two problems, and I've also added 2 more problems of iron also in between. You can have a look. It is not very challenging. All are simple with your stoichiometric relationship. Please understand, for alum reactions you may require sufficient alkalinity. If sufficient alkalinity is not there, you have to add lime. Okay, please make a note on lime in terms of in what it has been mentioned in the problem, and based on that you can also convert vice versa. Okay, so for quantity calculation, you need not worry about concentration multiplied by the flow. You may get the concentration multiplied by week, month, year, anything you can calculate. And if it is anything on mentioned with the rate, you can also multiply with the rate. You may get a chemical cost. Okay, and if sufficient alkalinity is not there, you can go with this equivalency, and you can find out how much amount of the alum to be added. Is it okay? And other 3 problems of your concern. Okay, and I'll update this in the Dropbox and have a look and have a glance how to calculate other dosages as well. Is it fine? And 2-3 problems of other nature with iron salts. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. So let me stop here, and at least today you have a glance of these 2-3 problems of ferric salts as well, and you can also refer some standard textbooks or some GATE or IAS question papers. Predominantly, they may ask these out of repetitive questions in GATE as well as IAS examination. You may get variety of problems. Okay, so have a look and be familiar with calculations. Yeah. Okay, let me download the attendance now. Yeah. Okay, so kindly have a look. Mostly I'll update today in the Dropbox. And if it is any difficulty, we'll discuss in the next class. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Divya.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll meet tomorrow. Thank you, Nazir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.